This episode is brought to you by Visit Denver. Because Denver Restaurant Week is coming up. Presented by Superior Farms American Lamb, Denver Restaurant Week runs March 1st through the 10th. And this year, hundreds of Denver's best restaurants are participating. I'm looking at it right now. Blue Island Oyster Bar. I want to go there so bad. Aesthetically, it's beautiful. Also, I'll just eat oysters all day. Each spot is offering a multi-course meal for either $25, $35, $45, or $55. This is the perfect opportunity to explore other parts of the city or rekindle your love of a local favorite. Oh, Cuba. I don't need an excuse to go there, though. I'm not even going to bring that up with you, Paul. Never mind. Explore the menus from hundreds of participating restaurants at denverrestaurantweek.com. That's denverrestaurantweek.com. Today on CityCast Denver, he really didn't want to do it. But after Congress failed to pass immigration reform last week, Mayor Mike Johnston announced budget cuts on Friday to the Department of Parks and Recreation and the DMV. Will these cuts ratchet up tensions around the migrant crisis? And between a rock and a hard place, what more could Denver do? Denverite editor Obed Manuel recently made a huge decision that he hopes will humanize the circumstances of people arriving here. So he's joining me to talk about what he did and why he did it. Today is Monday, February 12th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Obed Manuel, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Yeah, thank you. I expected to be on here sooner than this, to be honest with you.
I know. I feel like there's so many journalists in the city that we want to talk to. So I'm glad that you were excited to be here.
Yeah, totally.
So you announced last week that one of Denver's biggest newsrooms, which includes CPR, KRCC, and Denverite, are going to stop using the word migrant and instead use the term new immigrant. Why make this change?
There's two reasons, and the first one is accuracy and flexibility. We obviously adhere to the Associated Press's style. Obviously, we have our own in-house style book, but we rely on AP, as most of the industry does, heavily. Upon reading, the definition of migrant in the Associated Press's style book, I just found so much ambiguity in it. There's literally a sentence in its definition that says, or someone whose reason for leaving the country may be unknown. So to me that's just not tangible. That's not clear. And that's where I said there's flexibility here. But beyond that, this is a conversation that's been going on in my head literally since last January, when this really, really kind of the story really became a very real situation for the city and the state. And I'll credit specifically CPR reporter Paolo Salsita, who he was the voice in my head, who one of the first stories we had him wrapped into, he said, I don't know if I feel comfortable using the word migrant. And he offered up a few alternatives that I kind of I shot them down. I'll be honest. I shot them down because I didn't feel that they were accurate. He said displaced people. We said asylum seekers, refugees. And I was immediately like, those are good categories. Some of these people might fall into some of them. But for the most part, we try to use a catch-all term for headlines and newscasts, especially, which is a whole thing you have to keep in mind when you're trying to keep things concise, but also signal to the reader or the listener that this story is about this topic, this issue. And so we said we need to find a new term that we're more comfortable with, and that's really kind of what led the change.
I'm just nodding in agreement because we went through such a similar experience here at CityCast Denver. We've had this conversation, the exact conversation you're having, these different ways to identify people that's broad, but also specialized, but also related to the situation at hand, right? Which is, like you said, since last December. I mean, it's been over a year that we've had the situation going, and it's still a constant conversation. But something else that you wrote about this was you wrote that the word migrant has, quote, lost much of the humanity behind it. What did you mean by that?
I think it's the same thing where you use something so frequently that it just starts to lose the emotion behind it. So this was as much a journalistic change, I think, as much as it was like an emotional change for us as a newsroom. In our news meetings, it's always migrant this, we're going to do a cut, for radio on the migrant situation. I've lost count now of the number of times that Denver has published a story and how many times we've typed it out. And I grew numb to it, to be honest with you. I grew numb, and that's why a few weeks ago, this was actually a pretty quick change. Maybe 2.5 weeks ago, I brought this up to our leadership, and I said, I have grown numb to this word, basically, and that's not right, because at the center of this whole conversation, of this whole situation, there are like human beings and children here, and that to me is the crux, is that there are people behind that word. And if you look at national news coverage, I feel strongly that a lot of it has been mishandled. A lot of it has been very just, it's charged. No matter, someone's going to receive that word the same way that they'll receive immigrant. But the thing is that I can change at least a little bit of how I'm using my language. I can't change how somebody is going to respond to the term new immigrant, or what their feelings are about that. But I can at least tell them, these people, for the most part, we understand that their goal is to stay in the country, and that's irrelevant of what their legal status is. An immigrant is somebody who goes to live in another country. And whereas the migrant term was, I also started finding it to be inaccurate, because we've been covering this now for a year and a half. Kevin Beatty has been running around chasing, organizers who welcome him. He's not chasing them. uh, and I have met now dozens of these folks, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that I saw a lot of myself and like my family in them, because I'm an immigrant. My family is an immigrant family, and their hopes and dreams just sound so much like those of my family. And I have always referred to my family as immigrants. My family has always referred to itself, as an immigrant family. And so I say, why can't I apply that term to them too, seeing as how this is their intent, this is their goal. Maybe Denver isn't their final destination, but they're in the country that they say that they want to be in. And to me, that says we've done the on the ground work at this point, I think, to confirm that this is a term, new immigrants, immigrant is a term a label that we're comfortable applying to them.
I still am thinking about I guess the word new here.
Mhm.
Like, is adding new to it creating more division or more separation, or what? I guess, what does that function as part of this label, I guess?
I'm a pretty old school journalist. I realize I'm a young person. I'm only 32. I still think that we need to, as a news organization, we still need to tell the reader, the listener, that we're talking about a specific population. So if I'm talking about the long-term unauthorized Mexican population, for example, if there's an unauthorized Mexican immigrant who's been here for 30 years, I can't call him or her or them a new immigrant. I can't do that. They're established. They've built lives here. Whereas the folks who are coming here, the folks who are staying in like the hotel shelters that the city of Denver is paying for, they are new immigrants, right? That's just an accuracy thing. And you're right. Again, going back to that point, it's like we can't tell people how they should emotionally receive it. But I just do think it is important to signal immediately to the reader, the listener, this is who this person is. This is the category that they're in. And we're almost telling them this is the step of the journey that they're on. Because one of the issues with using the word migrant is it connotes this idea that somebody is on the move, constantly moving, transitory. Yeah. Whereas the way I understand it, the overwhelming majority of the people we've talked to over the past year and a half say, I'm here. Like, I am in the place where I intend to now live my life. And again, we've gotten some emails now from people who say, well, an immigrant is somebody who came here legally. And it's like, no, that's actually not the case. Just from a simple word perspective, again, an immigrant is just somebody who goes to another country with the intent to stay there, to live there. again, we talk about people, unauthorized immigrants, right? Undocumented, which is essentially the same category. It's another conversation probably to have at some point. But yeah, I think yes, it can cause some division and in thought, and I think that's ideally that's where I would want for it to stop. Just like these are people who fall into this category, but obviously there are going to be people who respond to it because maybe they have ill will towards a certain population.
And I want to get to that in a minute because that is, I think, an underlying part of this conversation. I've been a journalist for 20 years, and I remember the change from illegal to undocumented and how important that was. But before we get to that, I want to tap into this conversation that's happening right now in Denver, which is the budget cuts and how that fits into this conversation. Like, you guys have been covering the mayor as close as we have. We knew that he was waiting for this immigration bill to go through Congress, and now it's failed, and we're not getting the help from the federal government that we needed. What do you make of the mayor's decision to announce these specific budget cuts?
I think he traveled to DC, I think in January to kind of like lobby for work with her. He went to lobby for this thing that was basically dead on arrival in Congress, or at the House of Representatives at least, maybe even the Senate. I think that the way that the timing is right, I guess politically. He is a Democrat, so it is an election year, so he does kind of have to point the finger a little bit. We knew that the cuts were coming. I just think that I think maybe there was some optimism from the mayor that this was a thing that was actually going to go through. Just had all these facets to it, right? It had like aid to Ukraine and Israel, and it according to some advocates, and if you read the policies that were in place, like it would have made it harder for a lot of people to process asylum claims, to claim asylum in the country. But it also had, like, I think we read this last night, is about $1.4 billion tied for local governments, local cities who've taken people in, and I'm sure that came at the pressure of like the mayor of New York, mayor of Chicago, two of the most important cities in the country, and obviously Denver. But I think that the announcing these cuts is a good way. It almost maybe serves as an explanation. Maybe he was optimistic that this was going to pass. Maybe he was optimistic that Congress was going to get its act together and provide this funding. Whether you think that's a little blind optimism or not, that's up to you as a listener. But I think it's just the timing, I guess, kind of works out for him.
And that means we will need all of us to step up. We're going to need more of our corporate partners to step in and provide more summer internships for young people who might not be working for the city. All of the spirit of people who have helped provide services to migrants all around the city, we want your support and engagement too, to provide services to our own community as we try to fill in the gaps, because we believe we can get through this, we can get through it successfully. It will just take all of us to work together, and we'll work with the spirit of service the city has shown so courageously to date that we'll need over the months ahead.
Hey, it's Paul Caroli, executive producer with CityCast Denver. And I know it's not always easy finding your way here in Denver. When I first moved here, I didn't understand what people were talking about when they said we needed the moisture so bad. It's a very dry climate. I understand that now. And that's why the mission of CityCast Denver speaks to me. We spend all day, every day, finding the most compelling stories, the most interesting people, and the best insider recommendations so you can make the most of this city and also make this city better. Members of CityCast Denver make that possible, and we couldn't keep doing this work without you. Become a member of CityCast Denver today at membership.citycast.fm and get exclusive perks like ad-free listening, event invites, and members-only updates. That's membership.citycast.fm. Thanks.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
What I find interesting is it's been looming, budgets will be cut. We don't know what that looks like as a Denverite, but now we kind of know, right? These cuts include the DMV stopping in-person registration renewals and Parks and Rec reducing summer programming and not even like planting flower beds in our parks. Now that these things are clearer, how do you think Denverites are going to respond to this situation?
It's hard to gauge. I mean, it's hard to know how people are going to respond. Part of our mission with Denverite, obviously, is to tell people tangibly what's happening with their city, what's changing, how this thing is going to affect you. And I've made this point in the newsroom before. It was like, despite our efforts to try and, tell very human stories, we still have to tell people how spending on this population and on other things in the city, right? There's other factors here, as we noted in our story. There's millions of dollars in tax shortfall that was expected, or is at least calculated in. So it's like there's a lot of facets, but at the same time, there's an elephant in the room here. And I grew up reading news coverage like that had the word illegal alien, illegal immigrant, illegals, and I'm sure that those sentiments, those public sentiments, will be factors here too. I think that's where I'll leave that.
But I think also you have made this proactive change as a newsroom that you hope will get people to think differently.
One of the reasons why I got into journalism is because I always thought that if I told enough stories about people who looked like me, maybe people's minds would change. Maybe people would be a little bit more accepting. Over the past, almost 10 years that I've been in the industry, I'd be hard pressed to say that has changed. But my optimism has not changed. Ooh, sorry.
You're okay. You can take a moment.
I still feel like if I tell the story, or if we as an outlet, as a team, tell the story of a clown who made his way through 5-6 countries and crossed an incredibly dangerous jungle and was making, I'll say it, white children smile at Stanley Marketplace, where many affluent families spend their weekends. I still believe that makes a difference. And so if I refer to Yuppie the Clown as a new immigrant, then I'm just telling his story, regardless of what his kind of like legal category, legal status is. He's doing it. Like he's being a new immigrant right in front of your children. And I think that's what's great about journalism, is that you get to keep doing this. I get to keep doing this.
So I'll be honest with you, after you guys made the change, I'm like surfing social media, just hearing what are people saying about this, right? And I'm paraphrasing others' comments, but I definitely saw posts that were like, you can call illegals whatever you want, but they're still illegals. Like, you know what I'm getting at? Like, you can't impose humanity on someone who's making those comments. But what do you think? What do you think about that when you see that versus the work that you're doing?
I see it against the work, but I also see it against the life I've lived. That is language that I have heard my entire life. And it's been lobbed at me. It's been lobbed at my family. It's been lobbed at my friends. It's been lobbed at, my entire neighborhood in Dallas. To get really nerdy, there's a scene I always think about in Game of Thrones where Tyrion Lannister is telling Jon Snow, it's like first season, he tells him, don't let the world, make you feel bad for what you are. If you wear it like a badge of honor, it's like it could never be used against you. And so I think that just accepting the label of immigrant as somebody who here, and like immigrant life is very hard. I'm not saying it's my responsibility to make that easier for people, especially the people who are arriving here, because that's not what I do. But I can at least be honest with the public about what these people are going through. And what they are going through is they are trying to start their lives in the United States as new immigrants.
So before I let you go, I just want to come back to this conversation about the mayor and Denver in this moment that we're in. Thinking about what comes next, we've talked to the mayor about some innovative legal strategies he could employ, but that would require the city to take on some serious liability when we talk about, maybe employing many of these folks. the mayor could himself risk prison time by doing that. But I just wonder, as someone that's been covering this, how far do you think he's willing to take this fight?
Oof, I think that's the $1 million question. He's seen already what the inaction is at the federal level. If you ask any immigration advocate, like, reform that helps people who have been in the country for a long time now has failed time and time again at Congress. We asked this of Senator Bennett when we had him on Colorado Matters. We're seeing, Republican politicians really push the limits of what states can do on immigration. And so I think that you're right. I think that that's a fair question to consider is there anything that Democratic, politicians, Democratic elected officials are willing to do? I mean, I think time will tell. I don't know. I think objectively, this is a hard situation. We've felt stretched the past year and a half as a news unit, Denverite has. And it's just the kind of thing that we're feeling that pressure and we're trying to figure out, how do we cover this? What do we do? And so it's like, if a language change for us is considered an extreme, it's like you do then have to ponder, like, what does an elected official with, spending power do? And I think you saw that today. It's like he's got a balance, and obviously we're going to keep asking questions of him, but you also don't want to be unfair to him. Like he's balancing a lot. Like it is his job, right? Ultimately, whatever fails in the city, right? Like from an optics perspective, is his fault. As far as a lot of voters go, and whatever succeeds, it's especially with the folks who are arriving, it's not going to be visible. Their success is not going to be visible because it's just people who are living their lives. So it's like, how do you show people that? How do you show people that they're contributing to the economy? How do you show people that they're paying taxes and they're doing this? It's much easier to say they're costing us this much money. So that's a great question. I hope we should all keep asking him that.
Well, Obed, thank you so much. This was really a wonderful and helpful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So you might be wondering at this point what we at CityCast Denver are going to be saying going forward, migrants or new immigrants. And to be honest, we don't know yet. We want to hear from you. What do you think is the best term? One of those two or something else entirely? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text on the Humanitarian Style Guide hotline at 720-500-5418. Again, make your voice heard at 720-500-5418. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell your congressperson about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye-bye. That guy Root Beer Richie of the Reveille, they put out another Mardi Gras ad that was like, come to our show. It's just going to be every band covering Mambo No. 5 for the whole show. And I was like, oh, this band is so good at promoting their things. I love them.